Hello, I'm Assistant Professor John Wagoner, and this video is to help you in analyzing the visual element color. This series of videos are going to help you in analyzing a visual artwork in our Art 206 class. So, overall, with color theory in this class, we're breaking it into two main groups. One is additive color, which are seen in the example as A. Colors of light mixed to produce still lighter colors. So we can think theater and theatrical productions using light on the stage. Then we see B up the side, and that's subtractive color. And those are colors of pigments mixed to produce other colors. So when we see this example, I do note it, that you don't always get gray or black in mixing all of these colors. You'll end up getting an olive or brown color. But in knowing all this about color theory will enhance your visual analysis and talking about color in a work of art. So some terms to be familiar with. In the color wheel, we talk about the two main groups, whether it's additive color or subtractive color. In this lecture, I'm going to be discussing mostly about subtractive colors. The term primary colors with the subtractive color wheel is that there is a hue that cannot be broken down or reduced into any component colors. They're the basic hues or color of any color system, and that in theory may be used to mix all other colors on that color wheel. The three main primary colors are red, yellow, and blue. Then there are secondary colors, and these are hues produced by a mixture of those two primary colors. So the example that I give you is red and blue mixed together equals purple, or you could call it violet, but for this instance I'm calling it purple. And then down below we see the three secondary colors: purple, or you can call violet, green, and orange. Next up we have intermediate colors, and these are colors produced by a mixture of a primary and a secondary color. Now we have the color red and the color purple. We mix those together, and what do we get? We get red-purple. Or some people call it purple-red. Again, depending on the equivalencies on each side and the amounts that have added, it may look more purple than red, and so you call it purple-red, or vice versa. Some people associate that with other colors. So we can see plum, eggplant, things like that. But generally we call them intermediaries. So now let's talk about some other terms. I've already been using the word hue, and this is just the generic color name. So at the very top it says color properties. That's the hue of blue. We can also see the examples down below, A, B, C, and D. For C and D, those have the hue of yellow. B is blue, C and D again are yellow. We also can see the value, the light to dark of that hue. So in B, we see the hue of blue getting lighter down at the bottom. And then with yellow in C and D, we see them getting darker. And in the very last one in D, we see the saturation and the chroma slowly sort of fading away into this brownish color. Then we can also see in the circle of A, the value scale, and then the chroma is being obsolete. It's less saturated on the outside of that color wheel. We just see variations of grays. It's like watching an old TV station where it's all black and white and really all grays. So now we're going to move into three other terms I think they're important. Tints, tones, and shades. I teach a color theory class, and I also teach basic color theory within my painting classes and also my drawing classes. But these three are very important for you to know. A tint is a color produced by mixing white with that hue, and it raises the value level and increases the quantity of light reflected. So if we had the hue red and we wanted to make it pink, it would then be a tinted red, or you would call it pink. Then we also see tones. Instead of adding white, we are mixing gray with that hue, and that will actually tone down the color. So we have that bright saturated red color. We add in that gray with it, and it won't be that bright red anymore. It'll be this duller gray-red mixture. Whenever we use this term tone, it can also mean a modification in a hue. So my example that you can see with the text, you see the green text of saying green background and the yellowish yellow text. Well, that green background has a yellowish tone, and if you look at the background, it's more of a pea green. It's not really green, it's not really yellow, but it's that greenish yellow background. We can also see shades then on the next term, and this is mixing black with that hue, and it lowers the value level, and it decreases the quantity of light reflected. It's making it darker. So if you look at the bottom of the slide, how the green tone or green hue is being toned down, it's getting into a tint at the bottom, turning to white. And at the top of the slide, we see it going dark. So we see shades, tints, and tones. I also want you to think about where you see these words in our daily life-to-life schedule. So where do you see shades? You probably wear them when you're going outside. And what do? They decrease the brightness. They decrease the quantity of light going through your eyes. So shades make things darker. Tints, though, there's a little discrepancy in that one. We think of tinted windows. And really, the tinted window is making it darker. And so we can think of them as being shaded rather than tinted. So the term is actually used incorrectly for car windows. Something to consider. Now, other terms that we see in color schemes, if we look at outfits, for example, in fashion, everybody has a color scheme and what they want to wear for the day, and we want to question why that is, and that'll be later on. But we can take a look at these color combinations and what artists try to do. So the first one is achromatic, and the big A in front of chroma means without. So it's black and white, without color. Monochromatic, as the word mono implies, is one. So it's variations of the same hue. So you could have one image and it's all red or all blue. It's monochromatic, using the color of, the hue of, whatever color that may be. Then there are complementary colors, and as we look at the color wheel off to the right, these are the colors that act like brother and sister with one another, but they are directly across from each other on the color wheel, as you can see with the black, white, and gray arrows on the circles. So we can see those color combinations. So we see red and green, blue and orange, and yellow and violet. You can say purple. But we want to look at these color combinations and notice how they've been used before, such as a raw red steak with a little bit of green garnish in the packaging. Or sports colors. We think of LSU, the purple and gold, where it's really yellow. Or we think of other sports teams, Bears and things like that, that really use those color combinations, and we wonder why. And there's also some other combinations that I'm going to describe to you in just a minute. I also want to mention about things being achromatic. In a film, if it's in color with full chromatic appearance, and it goes to black and white, usually it references something from the past, so that achromatic view is a flashback. So it's used a lot. Analogous colors, if we look at those on the color wheel, those are the adjacent hues on the color wheel. So we could have red, red-orange, and orange next to each other, and those colors used in a painting would be called analogous. There are triadic colors, and we'll show some examples of those later on, but there are three equidistant hues on the color wheel. So it would be if we took a triangle and the 3 points of that triangle rotated anywhere on that color wheel, whatever colors it landed on, that would be a triad. And there are different types of triads. So some examples of analogous colors, as we see in the far left, there's the orange, and yellow combination. The complementary colors, as we see, there's the blue-purple across from yellow-orange. And then the two gray arrows designate a split complementary. So it's just using other subtle colors together in a nice impact on the visual imagery. And lastly, we can see the triads and how that little triangle can be rotated anywhere on that color wheel, and you will have your three color combinations to create a great composition. So again, we talked about triads, so there are a lot of different types of triads. There are primary triads using the three primary colors, secondary triads, which you guessed it, use secondary colors, intermediate triads, and those are using the intermediate colors on the color wheel. And I've just given you some examples down below, like red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, or red, violet, blue, green, yellow, orange. All these different combinations can be used in different ways on a painting. It seems a little bit more scientific, I know, but it does break it down for the artist and what they want to use and how to paint it. So some examples of triads here. I've pulled the logo for Burger King, and yes, you guessed it, primary colors. We also see an image, a photograph here of someone's outfit mimicking these three primary colors. And look at what color choices people use in their day-to-day schedule. What clashes? That's what we really start to wonder. What doesn't work together? And how do we avoid that whenever we design something or whenever we paint or sculpt? That's what we really want to think about. So diving into more color theory, we talk about complementary colors. So these are two colors directly opposite each other on the color wheel. A primary color is always complementary to a secondary color. Because if you think about that secondary color, it's a mixture of the two other primaries. So the primary color text is blue, and then its complementary color would be orange, and that's a secondary color. And when we mix those together, the mixture rather is yellow and red. So those two other primary colors mixed together makes the complementary color. So let's say we had blue and orange, and we had them together on a painting palette, and I mixed those two colors together. What is that going to create? Well, a lot of people just say it's gray. Well, that's not true. This is when they become neutralized. It's sort of reduced in its intensity, and it does not look the same. It does not have the same effect. So a lot of people use this if they've got a blue object and they want to paint in some shadows or cast shadows on the piece. So they add in a little bit of its complementary color instead of black. So you can add a complementary color instead. A tertiary color can be produced by mixing all your three primaries, two secondaries, or complementary intermediates. So it's really a Mod Podge of all these different colors coming together. So when you think about if you're an artist and you want to know which colors to choose, you know, some people just go with their favorite colors. Well, sometimes we're drawn towards specific combinations, and this is explaining why that is. But what I want you to think about are these different types of complementary colors and how they're being used. So here I have an example inside of the squares called simultaneous contrast. And that's when two different colors come into direct contact and they will become intensified. If we look at complementary colors, again, they're like brother and sister. They're always fighting with one another, and they also play well with one another. So we see that green and red, they're really struggling. We can't tell who stands out the most. Same thing for orange and blue, and the red and green combinations down below in the photographs. They really make things pop. You know, they want to stand out to one another. So the brother and sister, you know, one is saying, hey, look at me, and the other one's saying, no, look at me. And they're fighting one another, and your brain pretty much just explodes with this color, and you're looking everywhere. But films also do this as well. If we think of The Matrix, they have a monochromatic color viewing throughout the entire scene, and it's green. You know, Transformers, they do a lot of orange and blue combinations using complementary, not just monochromatic or achromatic like we were talking about with old films. So color choices are very important. Besides the color choice, we want to think about how it affects us at this basic level of emotional response. So we usually see that it's conditioned. It can be personal, depending on, you know, even environmental factors, but it can elicit this response. And so we want to look at different colors and see what they mean. They can also be culture specific. So let's take a look at some basic ideas. A pink, most people think a girl, and then baby blue, that represents a boy. But then what about the colors red and green brought together? You know, we talked about a steak with a little bit of garnish, but you probably thought Christmas. You know, those colors are widely used all the time, and they're complementary colors. They pop. Yeah, it's the main effect. But now we want to talk about how these emotions can trigger certain associations. So if I had the range of scales up here of all these different hues, we take a look at red. And what's the first emotion that would be associated with this? Well, a lot of people would say anger, or a lot of people would say love. And it's very interesting that this color has two emotions that couldn't be any more farther from one another. They're completely separate. Love and hate, hate and love. Whereas I always joke on Valentine's Day, I'm seeing red. It's just angering me so much, but it's all red because of this association with love and passion. If we take a look at the color blue, we think of the emotions there. It's calm, it's soothing, It's also sadness. We also have some phrases that elicit these responses too. It's like, oh, hey, are you feeling blue today? We have this idea of sadness and blue being together. Whereas my response to this idea in color theory would be like, no, I'm not feeling blue today. I feel a little red and orange or green. How can one feel a color? Then we start to look at other hues. So yellow. A lot of people see this as happiness, or calmness, or being afraid, scared, being a yellow belly, or being yeller. We also take a look at orange. It can also elicit happiness as well. Green, it can be the color of money, as everybody thinks of, but we can be green with envy. There are these cultural specific phrases that come together. And violet, or what we call purple, these can actually give us different symbolic representations. So later on in art history, we talk about royal purple, this dye that was so expensive and so hard to obtain that only the rich and the royal families could obtain. I also talk about this response in color with football team locker rooms, that there were some examples. I believe it was the Florida State Gators or Florida State University. They were testing out the color combinations on their locker team football rooms and seeing which colors helped their home team score better throughout the season. And finding out that red would actually elicit the best response in winning in their statistics. When we think about them being anger or getting ready for the game, being pumped up. And the idea that I had was painting the away team locker rooms. I mean, what if you paint them, calm colors like a gray or some neutral? They're not going to be as pumped up anymore, maybe even blue. And I had a colleague of mine say that, well, we could actually confuse them and make these colors, confuse them in ways that we don't even think before. So the men's locker room could be painted pink, and the away team would come in and they would start to think that they're in the ladies' locker room, that they are in this confused state and trying to figure out, okay, what is going on? Why are we in the girls' locker room? Where is our locker room? And then they're not really focusing much on winning the game. And of course, these different effects could, have a whole different range of responses, but it's just one example. So now we're going to talk about temperature in color. So on the color wheel, you can actually split it right down the middle. Red, orange, and yellow on one side of the color wheel. This is what we call warm colors. Cool colors are the three other colors on the other side of the color wheel, blue, green, and violet. So some colors are warm and some are cool. Think of warm colors like fire and sunlight, cool colors like grass and water, and they can have an effect. So when we look at this painting by Pablo Picasso, and the old guitarist, again, there's that cold, cool color, blue, but also gives us that emotion of sadness. So another example of using temperature, it can help us create depth, movement, and change our mood or emotion on an image. The warm colors that we see are aggressive. They appear to advance off the page or off the painting or in the photograph. Cool colors are very passive. They seem to recede. So in looking at the blue and the red, the red really pops out at us more than the blue. Well, that's because it's warm. We also see that a single hue or a color can be warm or cool. Now this may be a little confusing, but if you look down below, it says there can be a warm blue and a cool blue. Now, if you look at the differences between the two, the warm blue has a little bit more violet in it. It's got that red mixture in there. So it jumps out just a little bit more than just that standard blue for the cool blue in that text. So if you can't see it, you can maybe get closer at the screen. You can see how one next to the other jumps out. But I always suggest for my painting students, whenever they buy their paints and pigments, go to an art store, look at those paint tubes, and you can see the differences between them, such as this. So this is just a photo that I took with my smartphone, and you can see that we have on the far left lemon yellow, in the middle yellow medium, which looks very similar to that lemon yellow. But then look at that yellow deep. And overall, yellow is a warm color. But then which one is the warmest? If I put yellow medium next to yellow deep, which one is warm? I mean, they both are, but which one is warmer? So we take a look at the hue red, and we put in these mixtures, and we try to figure out which one is warmer than the other. Which one is jumping out at us the most? We can focus on that scarlet as really sort of screaming out at us. And really, we want to focus, again, which is warmer, which is cooler. So if I was going to paint a background or the darker sorts of the paintings, I might want to use that cadmium red deep. Now, it's not always associated with light and dark in those colors with the value. It's always placed off of that warm and cool hue. So again, we talked about how it's a little bit of relative color mixing, putting them together, you may see how they interact with one another. Just seeing the colors, placing them next to each other, it can change. So another example for simultaneous contrast and making an after image, looking at the square at the right after a long period of time, you could pause this video, stare at it, say 2-3 minutes, and then look away, and you will see this after image when you stare at the white blank square on the left. You can try it out. We can have other optical effects based off of color mixtures. This is pointillism in this image, mixing these minute dots of colors. The colors aren't actually mixed themselves, just the dots. So dots of red, dots of blue, 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 dots of yellow, 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 dots green, 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 green. And this layering effect, this stippling of these colors, can really put the image all together into this compositional whole and creates this effect. So it's sort of like looking into an oil slick in a parking lot where we see all these different colors put together. But in here, this image presents us with a whole variation of these chromas. So just in the end, something to think about with color theory. Observe the colors around you, see what colors work well with one another, and relate it within the color wheel. Is it warmer? Is it cooler? Drive down the road and start to see if you're driving home from class on the interstate and you start to look at the trees around you, they're a warmer yellow-green surrounding you. And then far off in the distance, it's sort of hazy. It's a blue-green. Again, cooler colors in the distance, warmer colors around you. Start to notice color combinations that people wear. I always like to point this one out. Like if a redheaded boy or girl wears green, does it truly complement their outfit? Or is it a different color? I mean, is their hair really, quote, red? Or is it more of a intermediate color? Also take notes of the colors surrounding sculptures in a garden setting. In the background, it would be green, but what variation of green? Is it warm? Is it cool? Is it intense? Use those words. Talk about the image. Is it achromatic, monochromatic? Use all those different color combinations. If you see a triad that's present there, explain, what triad is there. Where do you see those colors? Is there a majority of one color versus another? So you really want to make sure to talk about the primary colors, secondary colors, complementary colors, which colors are widely used. If it's warm, if it's cool, if it's a mixture of both. Are there any symbolic meanings with the color usage? Or is it suggestive in any certain emotion? So within every work of art that you're going to look at and analyze, remember these terms, use them wisely, go through each one on your checklist that's provided.